Hello, Elf from Anella Visuals here. Today's video is the first of two in which we will be modelling, UV mapping, texturing, lighting and rendering a pendant light that hopefully by the end of the two parts will look a little something like this. In this first part we're going to be modelling and UV mapping, and I'll also show you how to import 3ds Max files straight into Maya. In the second video, we will be focusing on texturing, and we will be texturing using triplanar projection methods. We will also be using the Substance in Maya plugins. So if you want to go straight into that texturing tutorial, I'll pop a link up above here now. If you want to learn how to import those 3ds Max files and just learn a little bit about how we go about doing something like this, then please stick around. Cool. So the inspiration for this was made by an Italian company called Foscarini. Now you can head over to their website. I'll pop a link down in the description. And if you go across to their product downloads page, you will see that they have lots of different materials and resources to supplement the light itself. So you can see here we have some technical details. We've got some photometric curves, so IES data, and then we also down here have some other file types. So we've got a 3ds file here. So we can actually import that straight into Maya, but we do just need to enable something to start. So in order to get that going on, we will need to download and install the Maya bonus tools. So head over to this website. I'll put a link for this down in the description as well. Download and install, and once you do, you should see you'll have a little drop down now which says bonus tools, and if you go over to your plugin manager and you do a little search for 3ds, you should now see 3ds import, and if you load that, you will then be able to load in your 3ds files. So I'm just going to drag mine in, and the first thing to note with this file is that the documentation for the light says that it should be 45 centimeters diameter and 20 centimeters high. So it's always a good idea just to double check that the scale of these things are correct. So I'm going to go to Create, Polygon, Primitives and Cylinder. And if it is correct, then it should match up. If I put a radius of 22.5, because that's half the diameter. But we can see here that the light is much too large for our real values inside of Maya. So in order to fix that, we will just need to divide our scale here. So if we put 0.1 in each of these, we should end up with something the right size now. Now you're probably wondering why we are actually modeling this thing if we already have a model of this thing. Well, because it's come from a CAD background, or it's been made in CAD, it does mean that it's not very well optimized for our Maya environment. And what I mean by that is we've got a lot of irregular faces here, and if we smooth it we can see that we've got a lot of holes. It's all very triangulated and it's not particularly nice. So we'll definitely use it to help with our scale and proportions, but that'll be it, and we'll work on our mesh down here. Okay, so let's get started then. If you're interested in downloading the project files along with the mood boards, head over and sign up for our newsletter and you will get that as a part of your subscription. Cool. So we can see here that we've got two really good references. We've got our 3ds file and then we've got our PureRef board. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that I'm in a modeling workspace. Okay, so we have our cylinder. I'm just going to move that up back up to the center of the world, and we can use this as a reference. So our transform here, I might give that a little name, and I'll call it scale ref. And if we want, we can add that to a new layer, and that will just allow us to make it unselectable. So what I'm going to do with this cylinder is I'm going to come over to the poly inputs, the poly cylinder inputs. I'm going to increase the subdivisions to something like 40. And then I'm going to highlight over height and bring my mouse into the viewport and just middle mouse click and drag. And that's a nice way to interactively change your selection. So I'm going to get this to somewhere close. And let's just bring this down a touch more. Okay, and that's cool because we're going to bevel this anyway. And we're probably not too far off there. So height, let's go for something like 0.4. Cool. And then I'm going to go into face selection mode, and I'm actually going to delete all of those faces. And then edge selection mode, and let's select, double click and select all the perimeter edges. And Control E to make an extrusion, and then we can use the thickness to bring that in. And at this point it's quite nice because we can sort of just trace the outline. So I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to scale it in. If you haven't got this 3ds Max file, then it would just be a case of using your reference images and remembering that we had measurements which said 20 centimeters high. So we can come in and we can say 20, and we can change the height baseline, and then we know where we need to end. And with your creative eye, you can, I'm sure you'll be able to get that looking just about right. Okay, so I'm going to carry on extruding this. I'm going to make one and then scale. Maybe I'll come up to this one, and then I'm going to make another extrusion, and this time I'll come up to about here. And we can see that we've got an extrusion on the inside, so I'm going to bring that in like this. And then actually we want to go back down. So we're going to make another extrusion, and we're going to come inside this time, hitting 4 to see the wireframe. And just to keep things neat, I'm going to vertex snap down to these vertices. I'm just having a look at the inside. So let's turn the wireframe back on and make another extrusion, come down, and this one flares out a little. So scale this. Okay, that's cool. And then what we can do is just leave that one where it is. I'm going to hide that for a second. And then what we can do is we can take the bottom edges and let's extrude those in. Turn our reference back on just so that we know where we need to go to. So I'm extruding in, and then I'm also moving up, translating in Y, scaling in. So I'm going to come up to this point here because there seems to be a little kink. And then another extrusion. This time we'll go to the outside of this diffuser. Like this. So that's looking cool. And then we can extrude again and we'll go up this time. And let's hide the diffuser. We can come up and then extrude again, scale in, come up. And we're not going to be seeing this part, so it's not super important. What we can do is select these edges and these edges, and then holding the shift and the right mouse button to bring up this menu, you can come down to bridge, and that will bridge those together. And that will give you the concrete base. So we've got a lot of history in here. If you need to access that, then don't delete it yet. But if you are okay with that, you can hit Alt, Shift and D to delete that history. We will name this and just call this concrete base. Okay, and we will be smoothing this. So you can smooth it by hitting the number 3 key. And what you'll see is that when you do that, we sort of lose the definition on these parts up here. So any of the edges, we're losing definition because we haven't got any supporting edges to really hold that shape. So the way that I would be countering that is by just beveling these edges just to give you some extra supporting edges. So with the faces here, I'm going to select one and then shift double click the one next to it and then Control B to bevel. And then let's just bring the fraction in a touch. If it's going too quick, you can use this little wheel here and then that will slow it down a bit. So that's looking cool. And then I'll just put an edge up here and an edge down here by going shift right mouse button, multi-cut, holding Control, clicking, holding Control, clicking. And if we smooth that and have a look, you can see we've got a nice rounded edge. If we compare that to our reference, let's just bring it up a touch. You can see here that we are pretty close. Cool. So save along the way. Just going to save this. And then let's do the same up here for these edges. So if we actually have a look at this, we don't much see the inside, but we do see a rounding off on this concrete base where it meets the metal. So I'm going to select these ones, these faces. Actually, we don't necessarily need to select the faces. Let's just do it with the edges and then hit Control B. And then let's increase our segments to 2 and come in and try and get that somewhere like this. And then we can just come in with our multi-cut again. So shift right click multi-cut, Control to make those loop cuts in here. So So that's looking good. I think we will just need to add a couple of edges up here just to make it a little bit more even. You can see here that we've got quite a large slope. So I'm going to do this in smooth mode just to see where the slope adjusts to. And if we have not got that quite right, what we can do is go into edge selection mode and double click, and we can use the slide edge tool. So we can shift right click, slide edge tool, and then you can hold the middle mouse button and drag, and that will slide the edge around. If you look at this in smooth mode, you can see the effect that that's having on the base here. So we just want to match it up somewhere close. You always want to be making sure that you're checking number 1 as well, because it's not always really obvious where your edges are in number 3 because it's interpolating. So just make sure that you're looking at using both of those modes. Okay, that's looking cool. I think we might need another edge in here as well. And with this one, we might just scale this in a bit. And if we need to slide it, same again, shift and right mouse, and then middle mouse click. Okay, I think that's looking cool. Let's do the same with the underside. Select these edges here, Control B to bevel, move the fraction, add the segment. Okay, and I'm just sort of eyeballing this a little bit now, but we could come back and actually have a look at our 3ds file and just compare what we have. Might have to move it down a bit. It's quite rounded here. Okay, so I'm not far off again. But I think we could just slide these a touch. And then just so we don't have anything poking through here, I'm going to select these ones, bevel, just tighten those up a bit. And the same up here, bevel. Let's get rid of our grid. Okay, that's looking really cool. So save it, and then let's delete the history, and we're good to move on to the next part. Some people like to UV map as they go per object. I like to do it the other way, where I've modeled the whole thing, and then I will do the UV mapping at the end. So I think let's do it that way. In order to create this metallic part, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select these faces here and then these faces here, but a nicer, and these ones on the inside, but a nicer way to do that is if you create your middle face selection over here, and then holding shift and the full stop or the greater than key, you can grow your selection. So I'm going to grow it to this point, then shift and right click down to duplicate face, and if you hit the W key, just to go back to move mode, you can see that you've got both of those selected at the moment. So I'm going to click off, and then I need to get those faces that are underneath here. And the easiest way to do that is just to click on the outside and then shift drag a box so you're selecting the inverse. And then we can go to modify center pivot. I'm going to go control 1, which is the same as going to isolate select here. And I'm going to select over all of these faces. And I'm going to extrude and hit my W key to go back to move and just move this up. And now we can use our reference if we come out isolate selected. But again, if you're not using that, then just eyeball it. Okay, and we can see here that we're a bit off with the thickness. So let's just have a look. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. And is this my version? Yep. And we're a little bit thinner on this version here, on our on the actual reference. So just going to sort that out by selecting over these, just scaling in a bit. Okay, let's try that. And I should just be able to scale this to a point that I'm happy with, but we could go back and delete that and reduplicate if we needed to. I think we're not far off, but I'm just going to isolate this because we've got the bevel going the wrong way now because we took the concrete base. So if I select these faces here and just move those down, you can just bring it up to point up here. We will need to add in a couple of supporting edges here. So I'm going to shift and right mouse, multi-cut, and let's put an edge loop in there. I've got quite a sharp edge there. So I think let's just bring that up a touch more. And let's scale it out. Okay, that's looking nice. Okay, we can still see that we've got a hard edge there now. Okay, that's cool. And then how are we looking at the top? We just need to add in another cut about here. And let's just make sure that we are coming up to where we need to be. And then I'm just going to harden up these edges a little. Let's have a look at the reference again. It's quite soft at the top here. I've lost it. Right, there we go. So multi-cut. I'm going to create a cut there. Actually, forgive me, I'm just going to bevel that edge. I think that's probably the easier way. Give it something like this. Okay, and then let's just isolate selected and just check the bottom is looking fine. That's all looking good. So Alt-Shift-D, and then we can also freeze the transformations on that. And Alt-Shift-D, delete the history, and we can name this one, we'll call it Metal Holster, for want of a better word. Okay, that's cool. And then what I'm going to do with the cable, just to save on UV mapping, is I will just reuse this one and we will stretch it out a little bit. So we'll do the cable in a minute. Last but not least is the diffuser. So if we have a little look at the diffuser, you can see that we've got this, it's got a little bit of a rounded bottom here, and then it's in this shell. So this is almost like it's a cover and the actual LED light would be inside this. We don't need to model the light itself. But the way that I would start with this is using a disk. So let's go to create polygon disk and let's increase the radius until where we need to be. Let's move it up. Okay, something like that's looking cool. And let's just give it the curvature that we need. So the way that I would be doing that is using the deform, the nonlinear bend. So I'm going to rotate it, holding the J key to snap that rotation to 180, and then deform nonlinear bend. I'm going to do the same with this. I'm going to hold the J key, rotate it down to 90 degrees, and then on my curvature I can get this to where I need it to be, something like 10 I think, but we're curving the wrong way, so I will just need to rotate this around again the Z axis. So that's curving this way, and we can just add another one of these in to curve it this way. So deform nonlinear bend, rotate, curvature, and let's put the same number in there, 10. Okay, and that's looking cool, I think. And to bake in that, we just delete the history, so Alt-Shift-D. And then what we can do is double click in face mode, and then let's extrude. That's coming in, so let's just go back to our move tool and come up like this. We've got a bit of a dip in here now, so we can just hit the R key and scale up until it flattens out, and then Control E, and I'm going to go back to my scale in a touch, Control E, back to move, and we will come down like this. And just so that I don't have to bevel this in a minute, if we make another extrusion, scale, and just come in a touch, that's as good as beveling. We're just adding in that supporting edge, and we can just add another cut in here. Might as well do that now. So you're probably thinking, why the hell is this black? And that is because of the normal direction. So we can reverse those if we go up to mesh display down to reverse, and that will fix it. And then we can hold Alt Shift D, delete the history. Let's smooth it to see how we're getting on. And if we come and have a look at our reference, we can see that we need to harden up this edge a little bit. So I'm going to shift into my multi-cut, create a loop cut there, and then let's also do another one at the top. So you can see I'm using a mix of different sort of techniques here, beveling or just using the multi-cut tool. Okay, and we're not far off. It just looks like our scale is slightly wrong. So I think we're going to need to make this a bit shallower. Let's go to modify center pivot, just scale that down. And also I think we want to scale by X and Z. So I'm just going to, use this one here. So I'm not scaling in Y. Okay, and we're not going to be perfect here, but we want to get it quite close. Okay, let's have a look at that. So it's not bad, but I think we just want to push this up inside a little bit, because from the reference images we can see a bit of the lip here, and it doesn't look as though it protrudes much from this cavity. So let's bring that down a touch. It might do a bit more than this though. Okay, so this is where using your eye comes into it. Okay. And I think that's looking quite nice. So I can delete the history on that and freeze the transformations. I can do that on everything, delete all by type history. And then let's just name this. So I have my light group, concrete geo, the metal holder, and the diffuser. And we can move on to UV unwrapping now. Cool. So let's save that and change our workspace to the UV editing mode. And I'm going to move my reference image out of the way at the moment. I'm going to go to UV toolkit. I'll just get this little message out of the way as well. And then UV editor. Okay, so they all have some UVs at the moment, but we will just be reprojecting these. So I'm going up to UV down to camera based. And the reason I do that is just so that I can then start making some cuts, so that I can then start unfolding this. And it's a bit easier to see when you do it like this. So I'm going to go to number 1 mode, and the premise here is basically we want to make cuts for the different shells. So I'm going to cut here because this top shell will be using a planar projection method. And then for this one, I think let's make a cut down here. And we will also need to make a vertical cut between this seam and this seam, just so we can nicely unfold this. And then let's make some more cuts. I will be doing a UV mapping tutorial, so if you would like a more detailed overlook on how to UV map, then please go and find that tutorial. I will put a link to it in the description below once it has been made. Okay, so let's make another cut, I think here, and then underneath here, and then we can make another cut up here, hitting G now to repeat the last action. Another one. Let's make one here. And again, we will need to make a cylindrical cut for this one. But I think because I can't see where the edge is particularly well, I think the best way to do that is to select these faces here and then shift greater than, and then we might just need to select those bottom faces, and then we can do a UV cylindrical map on that one. And then what we're going to be doing with all of these shells is unfolding. So at the moment you can see these are not very square, they're more rectangular, and then when I unfold you can see that they are more rectangular now, so more square, sorry. So you can come to layout, and the way that I work with my UV spaces, I tend to move everything out of the UV square. So we want everything to live inside of this one here. So when I'm working, I move things outside, and then when everything's done, I move it back inside. So with everything, I've created cuts across this whole shape, this whole mesh. I can select over everything and then go to unfold. And then if I hit layout, it's just going to put everything inside. But as I was just saying, sometimes helpful just to move things out. Okay. So this is where I would be going through and just making sure that everything is looking so we're not got too much distortion happening, and that all of our checkerboard is nice and square. So this looks good. This one we checked before. Okay, and because we are going to be doing triplanar projection, it's not the end of the world if we're not perfect here, but we still do need to have some nice UVs. So this one here looks a little bit odd, and I think that's because it's used a planar projection method. So if we do a cylindrical one for this and then unfold, and then let's lay that out just to get it similar size. Okay, and that's good for that. And then we're not really going to be seeing this stuff, so it doesn't matter too much. We might be seeing, will we be seeing this? No, we won't be seeing the inside of this. And then this is the very top, which we might be seeing a little bit just around the edge, but not much. Okay, so what we want to do with our UV shells is basically the things that are going to be the most prominent. Sorry, I didn't do this one. This one will be quite prominent, so, and it's quite thin as well, this. So let's do a cylindrical map on this. Unfold. And then because it's quite thin, I think we may just want to make a little cut in the middle. So I'm going to make a cut in the middle. unfold both of those now. And that will just allow us a little bit more scale. Cool. So if I just want to check those, I can just scale them up. See that they are square. Sometimes what can happen because your texture space here, if this was quite low resolution texture that you were using, you can see that this shell is not actually taking up it's not using many pixels, so you can get some strange artifacts happening. So you do need to be a bit careful with anything that is too thin. But I think this will be good for our example here. So this is quite a large shell, so I'm going to make this quite large in the texture space. And then the inside will want to be similar. If you want anything to be the same size, you can come over to your UV toolkit. Under transform, if you type in your map size that you're going to be using, so let's say 4K for this, and you get the size of this one, you can then set the size of anything else, and that will be the same. That will be using the same texel density as this one here. So I can scale these up a bit more. And you just want to make sure that you're not going outside of these borders. Okay, this one here, we can do the same, set this, and that will make it the same size, but sometimes you may want these things to have more space, because otherwise this space down here is going to be wasted. So you want to be making the most out of your square there as well. This one we're not going to be seeing, so we can pretty much scale that down quite far. This one again is the same, and this one we may be seeing just a tiny bit. Just trying to find room for it. Move this guy down. This one up here. Then we've got a bit more space for this. Cool, and this one we're not going to be seeing either. Okay, and that's all of that one, so Control Save. We can go to the metal holster, and this one is going to be fairly straightforwards. So I think I'll make a cut there and here. Oh, let's first project some UV, so camera based. And then a cut here, 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 and here. And then if we unfold these, and lay out, you'll see that these two ends are good, but these two are not, and that's because they haven't got any cuts down the middle. So you can just do another UV cylindrical on that, and then if we unfold layout. So this is the outer one. This is the one that's the most important. And then this inner one is not as important, so it won't take up as much space in the square. We will probably be seeing this one a bit, this top one, so let's make sure we've got some scale on that. And this one less so. Okay, that's looking cool. So that's that one done. And then we've got the diffuser. Oh, just whilst we're here, because we're almost there with that one. I'm going to clone it by holding shift and just dragging up. I'm going to scale it in. And this will be our cable. And then I will just bring those vertices up to a point. And then all we just need to make sure that we do with this is unfold and lay these out, because obviously the proportion of that shape has changed. So let's lay that out and that. And then we can lay these out as well. Again, that's cool for that now. So let's delete the history on those, and we're just left with this diffuser on the bottom. So camera-based UVs again, you guys got this going on now, so don't need to talk through it so much, but I still will. So make a cut there. One there, one there, one there. Make sure on that bottom one we go around the whole of the outside. And then unfold everything. Layout. And let's just make sure that this shell here has the most texture space. Followed by that one. And then these ones don't need to have so much because we won't be seeing them. Cool. Control S to save. And then Alt Shift D to delete history. Let's do that on everything. And then let's just do one final check. Make sure our UVs are all good. I think let's just bring the scale in a touch on these. Cool, that's looking awesome. Okay. And then let's just make sure we've got everything named and tidied up here. And then, yeah, we don't need this scale reference anymore. Cool. One pendant light modelled and UV unwrapped. Head over to part 2 for texturing, lighting and rendering. See you there.